Well, good morning, everybody. Our first map today looks at the last 72 hours of total accumulated snowfall, and this map is valid through last night at 7 p.m. So there was additional snow that fell in the overnight hours in parts of New England, but notice here, forecast models did a pretty good job at picking up on this big event. There were some places that picked up over 30 inches of snow just as of last night, and it was still going early this morning. This also shows the system as it came through parts of the upper Midwest, and this is going to be an area that's going to see even more snow in this upcoming pattern. I see at least two more chances of big snows that are going to hit parts of the upper Midwest in the next 10 days. And then, of course, the system that came into the western United States yesterday delivered, a pretty powerful punch. I was in San Francisco for it, and I was going to take a picture for those of you that have never experienced what this strong onshore flow looks like, but it's just a picture of gray. Just rain blowing sideways on extremely strong winds. In fact, we measured winds in parts of the Bay Area and surrounding regions over 85 miles an hour yesterday. And it's just incredible to think about all of the snow that pushed up into the Sierra Nevada, adding in just a short amount of time another 30 inches. And there's a few more systems coming into this area to add more snow in the next 10 to 15 days. So what will be interesting to watch will be the evolution of this map. Now, I have this map set to update about 9 o'clock Central Time every day when the 12Z data come out. So this is really yesterday's map. So we're going to see a pretty significant change in the snowfall deficits in this region. But in the upcoming forecast, more snow is headed into this part of the country and into the western United States. Now, yesterday's events, both on the east and west coast, did produce a lot of power outages. And this morning, we're still looking at those outages here across the country. One of my favorite sites, go check it out, poweroutage.us. You can click on the individual state and actually see down to the county level where those outages are. And again, you can see where those strong winds were around the Bay Area yesterday. Let's also look at the last 72 hours of total accumulated precipitation, as I'd like to note that there has been moisture coming into parts of Texas and Oklahoma, and we've been discussing, for months now the extent of the drought that's in this region. If the upcoming jet stream pattern holds, this is an area that could see even better moisture going into the week 2, and I'll talk about that more in just a few moments. But again, this is a 3-day map, and you notice that in parts of Northern California, the Sierra Nevada, color bar up here, well above 6 inches of liquid in this recent setup here. So in today's report, we take a look at the current reservoir levels for California. I also link for you the hydromet teacup data for the Pacific Northwest. Again, we'll look more into those once spring melt occurs, but right now Lake Oroville's spillway is open, and there's quite a bit of water currently sitting in that snowpack. Just take a look at some of the data here. I tried to combine both maps. I've got the snow water equivalent in percent over here on the right, and on the left I got the snow water equivalent in inches for the Sierra Nevada. And there are some places that are up to and over 100 inches of liquid in the snow in the Sierra Nevada. So any additional warming that we could see here due to this pattern, rain making it pretty far up in elevation, is going to continue to cause a lot of spring flooding going on in the western United States. One important thing to note is recently the snow water equivalent numbers have started to come up in the Pacific Northwest, which is exactly what we want to see. But this upcoming pattern is not going to be favorable for a lot of big snows in the Pacific Northwest going forward. So what we've got going on right now, just as the sun was rising here in parts of the central United States, you can see the large storm system that we dealt with yesterday in New England exiting the East Coast. And there's a lot of clear air and high pressure behind this. Now, as we prepare for the next system, the one that came to California yesterday, to eject out of the Great Basin and into the plains, I want to point out that all of that high pressure and clear skies allow temperatures to really drop in parts of the southeast. And this morning, the frost line made it really far into the south here. I see 2 time periods, this one, and then I'll show you the next one this upcoming weekend, of having another frost event in parts of the south and southeast. But today's all hazards weather map kind of shows the story. 7 states here in the southeast, with freeze warnings. We have freeze watches and a frost advisory as far south as the panhandle of Florida. But the system that made its way through the west, where we still have flood watches out, there's still a winter storm warning in the Sierra Nevada, flood watches into Nevada. Well, that system is making its way east, and that's why we see this whole area from Montana down to the Colorado Rockies under winter storm warning. As the system ejects, very strong winds will happen here coming into the plains, and a winter storm watch has been issued from parts of Nebraska through Iowa, South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and the UP of Michigan. So this will be the next system to keep an eye on. Let's get some kind of numbers about this before we dig into the models. The latest WPC forecast for the probability of getting at least 4 inches out of the next 72 hours. Again, the highest stretching here from parts of Nebraska into Lake Superior and all along the way. But note, better snows into parts of Montana, and then of course in the Rocky Mountains here, very high probability of seeing some pretty heavy snow. This stretches into southern Ontario though as the system moves over the Great Lakes here in the next 72 hours. On the southern side of this, heavy rains and also the threat of severe weather. Storm Prediction Center has been on top of this now for 4 days, highlighting that this will be the region tomorrow that we're going to have to watch out for the risk of strong to severe storms right here in the Red River Valley of the South and surrounding states. So let's go have a look at it with the high-res NAM model first. So we're going to pick up at 8 o'clock this morning Central Time, and you can see the system coming out of the Great Basin, snow spreading through Montana, pushing into Utah and Colorado. So very heavy snows are expected in this region. Now the high pressure over the south, this is what's causing the cooler air. But that's also going to be setting up the flow. Remember, flow goes clockwise around a high to open up the central United States to not only strong winds, but a significant recovery in temperature and moisture. On the back side of it, we're going to see a quick drop off to snow. And we're going to see here that by early in the morning on tomorrow, on Thursday, already flipped over to snow here in parts of the upper Midwest, northern plains, and then right here into Colorado, parts of Nebraska, and some rain coming into Kansas. This is a very important system for the central United States, seeing that it's spreading snow in New Mexico, Colorado, and the whole of the central plains, given the drought situation that's ongoing there. We're going to do drought monitor tomorrow to have a look at. Now, as this system advances to the east, here we are Thursday afternoon and evening, getting into those later evening hours. That's why this area is going to be in the lookout for strong to severe storms. Could be isolated supercells ahead of it, and then the main frontal boundary comes through, producing what will likely be a squall line to follow. So possibly 2 chances of severe storms throughout the day on Thursday here in this part of the south, mid-south. Now you notice as we go into the overnight hours and press forward, there's snow, cold conditions, strong winds on the back side of this, and that front continues to advance toward the south and southeast. And in the day on Friday, there will be the risk for stronger storms in this area as this system curls through Ontario and into Quebec. So that's just in the next 60 hours or so. Bigger picture thing, though, is this. Looking out here toward the first day of spring, March 21st, we do notice that the jet stream across the whole of the northern hemisphere is unblocked. There's no major ridging happening to slow this down. So it's not only unblocked, but it's further displaced to the south. And that's why both our week 1 and week 2 precipitation patterns look the way they do. Now, what I'll be interested in seeing is in the week 2 pattern, so starting next Wednesday and going to the following Wednesday, whether or not we are capable of actually bringing more moisture out of the Four Corner states into the southern plains. But it stays wet in California, wet throughout the Midwest, wet and increased risk of severe storms from the mid-south into the south and southeast, and then wet up the east coast as well. Now, many of you probably saw yesterday some of the forecast models tried to rip a big storm system up the east coast, one that could be producing heavy snows in the Appalachian Mountains. A lot of model variability on that. We're going to have to continue to watch it, but I would like to show you the latest comparison between the GFS on the left and the European on the right. So we have already seen through Thursday, so let's get out there. We'll park it right here on Friday morning. Again, this is where we could see the heaviest snows moving over, like the UP, centered on the UP, but snow flipping over on the back side of it here, coming through parts of the Midwest. That system then curls into New England, bringing rain. So this will be rain on top of the snow that's fallen here, too mild to get snow to get out of this one. And then that system moves off. Now, the European model is quite aggressive with a shortwave that'll be coming out of Southern California into Arizona and New Mexico. And if you just keep an eye on the European model solution here, this high pressure cell could have enough cold air in it over this weekend and early next week to be producing snow in New Mexico and Texas. And that is going to be the system I want to watch right here. So I'm just going to show you again back and forth on what we're thinking about for Sunday. And I'm really focusing on the European model here. Now into early next week, there is a couple of things going on. You can see the stalled out frontal boundary on the southern edge of that big high, producing rains along parts of the southeast into Florida and maybe down to coastal Texas. That is in both models. We see that next Tuesday into Wednesday, the next strong onshore flow event, really beginning on Tuesday, is coming into California and Oregon. It's pretty far to the south, though, like the previous one. And then that system is expected to pull out into the Central Plains and become a sizable low-pressure system about a week from now. But I want to note here that the European model and GFS don't agree on this potential system I mentioned a few moments ago right here. This is the one where some of the models are attempting to rip this cyclone right up the East Coast. We call that a Miller A type system. But the GFS is farther inland. The European tosses it out to open ocean. So big uncertainty here about a week from now when we watch what's going on over the southeast and up the East Coast. But no slowdown. And this is why I showed you, that forecast week 2 still very active across the United States. Let's get a look at some of the snowfall totals out of this. I'm just going to play this pretty quickly for you. Let's go out to 10 days here for the West. Again, a lot more snow for the Sierra Nevada. Look at what we're seeing, though, the upper Colorado Basin, which is currently, by the way, at 130% of snowpack here. But more of this into Arizona and New Mexico. All right. Not a lot of snow out of this pattern for the Pacific Northwest, though, given the southern displacement of the jet stream track. Let's then flip over to the Midwest and add up the snowfall totals here. We'll just go out to a 5-day forecast. Again, possibly seeing anywhere from 2 to 7 inches of snow into this corridor. Better snows in Montana. And then there is the chances picking up maybe 1 up to 4 inches of snow right now in the next 60 hours here in the northern plains. Not well resolved, by the European model, but it's there. But heavy snows are right into this corridor. All right, looking at all of this, this is the probability in the next 10 days of getting an inch of liquid out of this. And we know that this area is going to continue to see severe weather and flooding. But this just continues to beat back on the longer-term drought stresses we've been talking about for months that are remnants of last fall in this area. And very importantly, look at the moisture in the Four Corners states. And now we're seeing better chances of returning better moisture into the southern plains. Wanted to stress that for you here. All right, let's finish this up with a quick discussion on temperatures. 2 shots of colder air coming, and this map gets both of them. Everywhere in gray that you see here has a potential for a temperature to get down near or below that frost line, 32 degrees. And if we take a look at the timing of this, here's this morning's cold air, that white line representing the frost. And as we play forward into Thursday, there's the warm sector that opens up ahead of the next big storm system that goes in the midsection of the country. Here's the cold air that follows it with the high pressure. Now watch, this is minimum temperatures. What I want to see here is on Saturday morning, that's where we expect the frost line to be. Then going into Sunday morning, it now dips down into northern Louisiana and most of Mississippi, Alabama, and half of Georgia. And then getting into Monday morning, pretty much stays in the same spot. So that's the next shot at this cooler air that's coming through here. How long does the cooler air last? I think the European model's got a pretty good handle on this. It's most of the rest of March. As we've been talking about, the coldest air displaced in the northern hemisphere is over the United States. And until we get a big shift overall in the pattern, it's going to stay anchored likely here in the upper Midwest, northern plains, southern Canadian prairie, and then throughout the western United States where the troughs continue to sit and the snow is giving this kind of feedback here, keeping it cooler. But do note how as we get out here toward the very end of March, the models have backed off on the extent of the cooler weather east of the Mississippi River. And this is actually echoed pretty well with the collapse of the MJO coming back into null space for a little while, and the CFSV2 is picking up on it too. So let's go out here to that week 3, week 4 time period, and what we continue to see is that there's shots of cooler air followed by more mild conditions. We're going to watch for this early April warm-up potential, and we'll keep talking about that in this week's forecast videos. All right, busy pattern, but I got a couple things I want to share with you to finish this up. In today's report, we do talk about how quickly La Nina exited and the importance of the colder water here. We'll address this again in tomorrow night's in-depth video. And the last slide I want to show you is what we're watching out for in South America. So we kind of highlight better harvest progress here, but rains on the newly planted safrinha crop are going to push it there. Along the Paraná River, isolated storms, better rain to the south. But I just want to point out the NDVI values in Argentina and their main growing areas are still at the lowest they've been in 20 years. So we'll leave it there. We'll pick back up again tomorrow with another report. Until then, have a good rest of your week.